Good night, everyone. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I am here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the comments. I will go ahead and answer your questions. So I want to formally introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I help clients to get their status and green card in the United States. I'm also here every night at 9 p.m. to take your U.S. immigration related questions. So don't hesitate, put your questions in the comments. I know if you've been through the process, you're thinking about going through the process, even if you have already been through the process, that you have that nagging immigration question that you want answered. And I am here to answer those questions for you. Now, I usually come with a topic to talk about, and so tonight I'm going to just describe to you what the process is, what adjustment of status is, and what is consular processing. Those are the processes to get a green card, get permanent residence. And so I'm going to go through the forms, some of the forms that are used, what are the differences between adjustment of status and consular processing. However, keep in mind that your questions don't have to be related to what I'm talking about. You can still go ahead and put your questions, anything that's immigration related, in the comments, and I will go ahead and answer. I also want to let you know that I have a pre-scheduled live on Instagram at 9:30 also. And so as soon as I head over to Instagram, all you have to do is hop on over to Instagram by going to the link in my bio, clicking the Instagram button. It will take you to my Instagram page where you can continue the conversation with me, continue to get the information that I have to give on Instagram. So our conversation doesn't have to end here and now. So is this immigration for USA only? So yes, I'm a U.S. immigration attorney, hot stepper for life. I only answer questions or tell you about U.S. immigration law, immigration to the United States. You'd have to talk to a Canadian immigration attorney about their processes to immigrate to Canada. So go ahead, put your questions in. Let us talk about adjustment of status. So many individuals ask me, how can I apply for a green card in the US? One of the most common questions I get is, how can I stay here? Can I stay here? Do I qualify to stay in the US and apply for permanent resident? Now, if you do qualify to stay in the US and apply for your permanent residence, it's called adjustment of status. So you either adjust your status from maybe even undocumented, or if you have a current visa that you're on, and you can adjust it, then change it over to permanent resident while you're still in the US. Adjustment of status, in order to qualify, you still have to qualify through, in some way, through an employer, through a family member, through humanitarian means. And even if you qualify for the diversity lottery, that's the green card, the lottery for the green card, if you as long as you continue to maintain legal status in the United States, you could adjust status after winning the lottery. I call it winning, but after being selected to be processed for the green card lottery to get permanent residence, and as long as you have legal status, you can adjust status here. So through an employer, you must usually maintain your legal status. That means that, for example, if you're working with your employer on an H-1B visa, and now you want that same employer is going to now sponsor you to sponsor you for your permanent residence, then you'll have to make sure that to stay in the United States, adjust status in the United States, you have to maintain your H-1B visa or transfer to another type of status until you can complete the process. There are many different types of employment based, and so it really depends on your qualifications. It's very fact specific, and that's where you need to do a consultation to determine whether you qualify for permanent residence through an employer. Now, through family, if you are going to adjust status in the United States, the rules are similar, right? You do have to make sure that you can maintain legal status in the United States while you're applying for adjustment of status. However, there are some exceptions to that rule that I'm going to talk about. Safran, thanks for sharing the live. I appreciate that. How long will it take in processing of approval to bring my husband that I married at overseas to the US? So if you are a permanent resident right now, I'd say prepare for a 2-year process. Could be less, but the average could be 18 months to 2 years. If you're a US citizen, the same. I would say prepare for 18 months, which is the average, but up to 2 years. Does working unauthorized what happens? So in some cases, if you work without authorization, it can cause your any other types of immigration benefits to be denied. Now, in certain cases, for example, if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen and you're applying through that U.S. citizen relative and you worked without permission in the United States, that is basically forgiven, and so they don't usually penalize you. But in other cases, if in other types of applications, so for example, if you are going for your permanent residence through an employer and they found out that you worked for an unauthorized period of time, then that could definitely cause your application to be denied. Hi there, Dark Horse 45. It's nice to see you. Now, usually with unauthorized, working without authorization, if you're in the US, you're not going to qualify for adjustment of status unless you qualify for an exception. But once you are outside of the United States and you still do qualify for permanent residence, it would not necessarily go against you. So it depends on the facts in your situation to determine how it will affect your process and what process you're going through. My daughter, 21, filed I-130. How long? So if your daughter's a U.S. citizen and she's 21 or over, you could be looking at a 9-month process to an 18-month process. Now, keep in mind that the estimated amount of time I'm given is based on my experience, based on my observations. It's not down to a science. It's an estimate. So in your case, it might be different. But another way that you could actually get a better idea is because it's really dependent also on the service center. And so if you look at the service center that's processing the I-130 right now, you can actually see on the USCIS.gov's website, you can see how long they're taking. They're going to give a range of time of how long they're taking to process applications. Now, if you go to USCIS.gov and go to scroll down on the homepage and you'll see a link called Case Processing Times, you can search the service center that's processing the case, and usually those 3 letters on the receipt number indicates to you which service center it is. You can look for that service center and look at the range of time they're taking. Unfortunately, you do have some I-130s that are going for a very long period of time, but it depends on the service center and it depends on the type of application. Now, if your daughter's a U.S. citizen and you know she's applying for you as a parent of a U.S. citizen, 21 and up, you do have the fastest processing times right now, but you're going to have an idea based on an idea of the range of time the specific service center is taking by looking it up. Hey there, F3 category, can you stay in the US with holiday until you get a permanent visa? So no. So Safrana, you must maintain your status. Now, traveling back and forth, yes, that can be a possibility. However, once you get to the US, you should not be staying and causing your status to be to overstay your status in order to adjust status. Now, I am assuming you're coming on a visitor's visa, and it's very difficult to maintain a visitor's visa and then try and adjust status at the same time. Just because you have a limited amount of time, so you only have maybe 6 months maximum of permissible time to stay at any given time. And if you do try to stay, what can happen is that the F3, the length of time that the process takes, can go beyond the time that you can stay legally in the U.S., and that's going to get you in trouble because you wouldn't qualify for adjustment of status once you lose status. Once your status expires, you won't qualify for adjustment of status. Now, this is complex stuff, Safrana, and it's really dependent on timing, where you are in the process, and that's where it's important to get a consultation, because everything I'm saying here is not personal legal advice. It's general information. And so if you want to make sure that you approach your situation correctly, you don't make any mistakes, definitely get in touch, schedule a consultation. Hey, from the Caribbean, hi there, want to migrate with family of 3, where do I go? I'm 42. So it depends on how you qualify. So Kevin J, you can't just hop on a plane and move to the US. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. You have to qualify in some way. And in order to determine, I can sit here and I can spend a whole hour talking about the different ways. The best thing to do is determine how you qualify, whether you have options to move with your family to the United States by discussing those options in a consultation. But what I can tell you is that, for example, if you have a prospective employer, that could be a possible way if they're interested in filing for you. If you have a family member, if you have a U.S. citizen, a U.S. citizen parent, if you have a U.S. citizen sibling, that could be a possible way to get to the United States. I think you said you would bring your family of 3, so that I'm assuming that you do already have a spouse. And so qualifying through a U.S. citizen spouse or legal permanent resident spouse may not be an option. But if you have other relatives, such as a U.S. citizen sibling or a U.S. citizen parent. Now, keep in mind, married children of U.S. citizens, that process is taking 12 years. Now, siblings, immigrant siblings of U.S. citizens, that process is taking a minimum of 14 years. So they wouldn't be fast processes. And the way that things would go really depends on your facts. DBDJ, you're welcome. A boyfriend is a U.S. citizen and resides in Canada. Can he give me adjustment of status in the U.S.? So usually you will have to be in the United States to do adjustment of status. And you have to be married. So you have to first marry your U.S. citizen boyfriend and be living in the United States to be able to adjust status. My sister applied for my brother. It's been 10 years. Anyway, we can expedite. So in some cases, there is the ability to expedite if you have some sort of humanitarian issue. Are there bad conditions in the country? Very severe conditions, not just your typical conditions, but they have to be, is there conflict in the country? Is there a humanitarian crisis in the country? Is your U.S. relative facing medical issues? Even is your relative in that country facing medical issues? And so it depends, but it usually has to be more on the compelling side, more on the urgent side to be able to expedite. I want to file for my mom, but she has a 16-year-old. Will my sister automatically get to come? So great question. Unfortunately, if you are a U.S. citizen, so only U.S. citizens can file for their parents. And in this case, your parent would be an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, and immediate relatives of U.S. citizens are not allowed to carry along their dependents on the application. So unfortunately not. what would have to happen is that your mom would have to get permanent residence, and then when your mom becomes a permanent resident, she would have to apply for your 16-year-old, and that would be the fastest way for your 16-year-old to be able to come to the US. Sunkiss, schedule a consultation. Let's talk more about your situation and come up with a game plan for you to go forward. Thank you. I didn't have intention, just someone had made suggestions. I'll definitely schedule ASAP. So Safrana, definitely thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you. And as always, thanks for your great questions. I'm considering my kids. I am a US citizen. Thank you. Okay. And I saw somebody said, so Kevin 703. So is a green card an option? I'm considering for my kids. So Kevin J703, I wouldn't be able to answer that unless I get details about your particular situation, how you may qualify. Can a green card holder marry someone who's here on a visa? Yes, so a green card holder can definitely marry, and you know, marry anybody they want. How the process is going to go, though, is really dependent on your particular situation. If the green card holder marries someone on a visitor's visa, they're not going to qualify for adjustment of status, more than likely not. Just because in order to get through adjustment of status, that means to apply for permanent residence in the United States, they also have to make sure they continue to maintain their legal status. However, with visitors visas, it's just on a very limited timeline. And so it's very unlikely that the visitor's visa, which usually you're given a maximum of 6 months, that time will exceed the processing time, which processing time right now for spouses of green card holders is about 2 years. So you would likely have to go through consular processing. As long as your visa, your spouse who has a visa goes back to their country and waits it out, it would be a much smoother process then. However, if your spouse overstayed in the US, there is what's called a waiver process where they can get forgiveness for the overstay. And then once they get that, if they get it granted, it would allow them to leave the country, attend the interview, and not face the consequences of the overstay. What happens when you miss a biometric? So if you miss a biometrics, that can definitely lead to the termination of your application, the denial of your application. It's very important to avoid any delays, any complications in your case, that you call beforehand. And at times, if you missed it because you didn't get the biometrics appointment on time, sometimes you could get in touch with them, let them know, and they will either reopen. If they have closed your case, they could reopen it, or they'll just correct the mistake. So very important you get in touch with the USCIS if that is the case. If you have an interview scheduled for US naturalization, what documents do I need to bring? You're gonna have to look at your letter. It's very important that you look at your notice, because I don't know what your situation is, Sunkiss. And what you need to bring to the appointment is really going to be dependent on what's going on with your application. So for example, if I have clients who at the time they were living in the US between the age of 18 and 26, there is a requirement that you sign up for selective service. I make sure they carry a copy of their selective service. If they've had tax issues and in the past that they've straightened out, I make sure they take their tax returns for the past 5 years. If they have a criminal issue, or then I ask them to take certified copies of those documents. So what you will have to take is going to really depend on what's on your interview notice and what's going on with your particular case. You know, for example, do you have children? You have to take their birth certificates. Do you have a spouse? You have to take the marriage certificate. One thing you should not leave behind is don't leave behind your green card, your actual green card. Take your passport with you, take your birth certificate, take a copy of your N400 just so you can refer to it, because the officer does go through the application with you in detail. So just make sure you follow instructions. The list I gave you is not comprehensive just because I don't know what your situation is. What's the best way to reach them? Because I've tried making contact, but no luck. So I know the wait times are very long right now, and so you do have to, the best way right now is to call that number and speak to an information specialist. Now, one way that you can speak to someone is by calling that number, the customer service number on uscis.gov, and say reschedule biometrics, and they'll get someone. Now, wait times is ridiculous. It is about 100 minutes just to wait for someone to come on. But if you do have a pressing issue, you definitely want to make sure that you go through that tedious process. Now, thanks all for your questions. So it only asks for passport and green card and state ID. So I don't know what your situation is, but I don't, definitely that you should not leave behind. Definitely don't leave that behind. But there may be additional things that you have to take depending on what your circumstances are. Taxes, birth certificates, your birth certificate, marriage certificate, divorce decree. So you want to, if you really would like some advice, you're always free to schedule a consultation. But those are some of the things that I tell my clients to take, especially if there's some issue or there's some fact in their background that I know the officer is going to ask about. SAL 505, you can go ahead and schedule the consultation by calling the number. If you go to the link in my bio, it's going to take you to the website where you can fill out a contact form or call the number directly on the website, and a scheduling coordinator will take your call. They're available up until 11 p.m. tonight to take your call and schedule a consultation so you can get it out of the way. Also, tomorrow between noon and 5, there's a scheduling coordinator, and Sunday as well. Mondays to Fridays, 9:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., there is a scheduling coordinator who is there just to take your call and put you on my schedule. Does age matter when married? Your spouse to sponsor them? It may spur additional questions from the officer. Now, as long as so the consultation fee is $150 for up to an hour, but it is well worth it, especially for example, in your case, some case where you're not sure what you should be taking. You want to make sure you prepare for your interview before you get there, not when you get there and you've realized that you've left certain documents, that you forgot to do this or that. And so the consultation is it's worth your time and your money, because you go in knowing your options, knowing how to approach your situation, avoiding mistakes that can turn into expensive mistakes in the future. I am going to head out now. So now, Virgo, I was saying that age may cause, if there's a big age difference, the officer is going to ask additional questions. They may approach your marriage with more skepticism, and it's really up to you to provide the evidence to convince them that, hey, age is just a number in this case. How frequent is too frequent to visit the United States from Jamaica? So there is nothing set in stone, but you shouldn't be traveling in such a way that it indicates to the officer that you're trying to live in the United States. So for example, if you're traveling and you're staying in the US for 6 months every single year, the officer might think you're trying to live in the US with a visitor's visa. If you leave the US, stay for 6 months, leave, and then come back a week later, that may also be a red flag for the officer. Now, I am going to head over to Instagram. The conversation doesn't have to end here, but I do have a pre-scheduled live that I do on Instagram at 9:30. All you have to do is go to the link in my bio, click on the Instagram button, follow me, and then we can continue this conversation over there. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will be on Instagram. If you can't make it on Instagram with me, just join me tomorrow at 9 p.m. where I'll be here again. I'm here every night. So Virgo Queen Dana, if you go to Instagram and you go to The Immigration Attorney, I have the same handle on Instagram. So that would be the best way to meet me over on Instagram. So I'm The Immigration Attorney, same as here. I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll see you on Instagram right now. Have a good night, everyone.